This conference, like we said, we've taken a lot of heat, right? I'm not an organizer, but the organizers did everything they could to make this as safe as possible. The biggest risk, I question Jeff's judgment and Rod, because he asked me and Tro, anyone who knows us, to do a joint talk. And everyone said that'll be an absolute train wreck. Unfortunately, Tro can't be here because he had neck surgery. So we'll have to save that train wreck for another time, but I get to talk this time. So I'm going to talk more about from the front lines, what we see. The reason we started the podcast with Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, we wanted to help Jason get on the map, first of all. No, we wouldn't have had liftoff. A lot of you wouldn't know us probably. It would take a lot of time because you have to have credibility, and Jason has absolute credibility. So here's my disclosures. No financial interest in the pharmaceutical industry, obviously. General internal medicine in San Diego, California. Soon to be direct primary care in the next few months with a great partner that I have coming in. Yeah. And so I've been doing this stuff for 3 years. Why did I start? Because I've struggled with weight my entire life. Anyone who saw the movie last night, you can kind of see that. And so I was looking for an answer, and I know so many people have been struggling. And so I co-host the Low Carb MD podcast, founder of Low Carb Advisor, which is now going to be Low Carb MD San Diego, direct primary care and metabolic health. Podcast has been outstanding. The reason I can talk it's amazing to me that I'm talking here. A couple years ago I was sitting in the seats. And I'm telling you, when you start realizing the people in this community, you understand. First of all, I'm socially responsible because I'm not wearing a tie. There are studies that show if you wear a tie, you pass disease more frequently. Plus, I've been practicing social isolation for a long time, not by my choice. But I think, the thing about the podcast is sometimes people get honest about not taking ourselves seriously, and I want to assure you we take what we do very seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously in that role. Because we believe we all have something to say, and we've learned a great deal. I think when you think you know it all and have all the answers, you're not going to learn. So I think being able to be flexible, the people that we're criticizing are the ones who won't take direction. You look at Tim Noakes, who completely reversed himself. That's someone I respect. And they stood the fire so that we could do it. So here's our learning objectives. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. And so I want to address one thing very quickly. A lot of people have criticized us coming together. A lot of the stories that you've heard are because of Doug Reynolds back there, Low Carb USA. I've met all these people on our podcast face to face, right? There is a value of being face to face with someone. Having remote is not the same. When I touch my patients, I talk to my patients, bond with my patients, that's different than what you can do on video. Although video is very important, and telemedicine is going to be growing like crazy now. You have to understand that these are my objectives. I'm going to run through them real quick. Understanding the barriers. What are we up against? Why is it so hard? How come everyone's not doing it if we have so much data? And then understanding the physiology of low carb and intermittent fasting. As a doc, my frustration is when people say, I don't want to know the science, just give me a meal plan. Because you have to understand the implications of this. You have to learn what the cool kids are talking about. I'm going to talk about a lot of the cool kids who have influenced me over time. So Longevity 101. Okay, I'm going to come out a little bit. I'm a Christian, so we like red letters, right? When we see red letters, we get excited. And since Ben's not here, I want to put the important stuff in red letters. Ben is one of the nicest people on earth. Last year at Denver, people might have seen pictures with us exercising together. That's the value. I learned a great deal because I said, Ben, look, if I want to live a long, healthy life, what do I have to do? He said, oh, Brian, that's easy, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit. But this is a direct email from Ben. Because I said, look, Ben, I don't want to get up there and misrepresent what you're saying because he's a serious scientist. He says we don't have data on that yet, or we do. So I think it's really important but he says insulin resistance is related causally to almost every, and I think he means every, but he says almost every non-infectious chronic disease known, right? That is a massive statement from a brilliant scientist. And if we recognize the role of insulin resistance, then we start to understand there's a common root. Ivor would have liked that if he wasn't flying home right now, right? He likes root cause. I love root cause. Because why is it that we're throwing drugs at all these things? So Ben says, look, these are simple answers to your question. This is why us docs die 10 years before our patients, because stress, sleep deprivation, smoking, alcohol, exercise, diet. That's it, guys. That's what the best guy on longevity says. He says, use that as an intervention, not drugs. So another fairly smart guy, Jason Fung, who's one of my good friends and someone I respect. I know his integrity, I know him as a person, and he's the one, because of him, he ruined me and Tro financially, because he said, no outside interests, ain't gonna happen. Our podcast is self-funded by Patreon supporters, and me to start with, because I believed in the cause, right? So luckily I could pay my rent because a lot of people have pitched in $2 or $5. That goes a long way to help us get the message out. And at some point we have to put our money where our mouth is, right? People coming in supporting conferences or doing it online streaming. And I respect people staying home because I think that's wise. But a lot of people had travel plans and they're coming from Australia, New Zealand, and it's tough at the last second. It was horrible timing. You should have planned for that, Jeff, before, but I guess you didn't have time. That this epidemic thing is going to happen right at the same time. Because most of us were here well before the travel. It's easy to sit and say the quarterback should have thrown it to that guy, right? So sometimes judgment it's tough on us, especially from within our own community. I think what we're learning is we have to build each other up. And Ben Bakikio, if you don't know him, you need to know him. He's a guy I made fun of when I first heard about him, but he says the most insulin-sensitive tissue is muscle. And if our goal is to keep and so Ben's saying is keep your insulin as low as you can. And the other Ben Bickman and Ben Bakikio, sorry, they both have the same first name. So Western medicine, what do? We treat every symptom with a drug because we can get you in and out super quickly. You have hypertension, here's a drug. You have high blood pressure or high blood sugars, here's a drug, right? And then we'll throw you on 3 more drugs just to be safe to make sure. So I wanted to run through all these stuff really quickly. This is, but if you could see, that's even better. Yeah. We'll let Nadir Ali and Ben Bickman talk about that stuff because there's no way. So I'm going to give you an internal medicine perspective on this stuff. And the scientists, luckily they're not here right now, would be flipping out. So the train is your liver. And I make a joke about this, but part of the reason I left my practice is because it took me so long to explain this to patients. Now you're getting a more complicated view than my patients would. And I want everyone to know, just like Ben Bickman, Ivor Cummins, they're very generous with what they know, and Jason Fung. I want people to be able to use it, so if it helps you, please use it. Take any slide from my set and use it because it will save lives and help people. So the people are sugar, pushers are insulin. So the question becomes, how much sugar can we have in our bloodstream at one time? 1 teaspoon. The entire bloodstream, 1 teaspoon. So how much sugar can the body hold now? That 1 teaspoon we got, that's 4 grams. Liver glycogen, 25 or 30 teaspoons. Skeletal muscle, 400. Well, maybe both Bens are right. If that's where I'm going to store most of my sugar, you want to have more of that, right? So you have 100 teaspoons you can put there, more than your liver, more than you can in your bloodstream. So let's say you go and you're a healthy eater, like they recommend, acai bowl. Maybe just us guys in California know what that is, but it's this fruit bowl that is supposed to be the healthiest thing, 117 grams. Fresh orange juice, no chemicals, just orange juice. That meal, you're gonna have 42 teaspoons of sugar. Now you have hamburger, fries, large soda, not even supersize any of this stuff in a regular shake. This is from their website, 68 teaspoons. So if you do the math, you start looking back and say, oh, I've already filled up all this, assuming your stores were completely empty. You're already overflowing, not good. So people say, well, I just have this. Okay, you can keep 1 teaspoon in your bloodstream, the rest has gotta go somewhere else. So this is my simple design. So your liver's the train, right? This is your first stop, you come in the morning, it's empty. Why? Because you've been sleeping all night. Hopefully you're not sleep eating, right? So the morning is empty, everyone gets on, everyone's happy. You can spread out, have social distancing, that's great. So second stop is at noon, right? Now you have 110 people and you have 100 seats. What do? Just get as many people in the seats as you can, and 10 people stand in the aisle. Hopefully people are nice to each other, and let the people who are older sit down and you stand up. I'm giving you social instructions too while we're talking. I have a great social message here. But now you get to that third stop, and you know what? Now I didn't steal this from Nadir. He happened to pick randomly the same slide I had, but it's the same point. But at least these guys are wearing gloves, so that's good, right? But these people are upset. Why? They're the sugar who can't get on. They have to stay in the bloodstream, and they can't stay there, and they know it. So what do? You get these guys that push people on the train. Who are the guys? The pushers are insulin, remember. So now you got insulin forcing people on the train, you have a full train. Now you go to Dr. Unwin, one of my other heroes, and here's what he says. This is how it all kind of ties together. This is what we do clinically, is you show this to patients and they say, oh my goodness, because that's 21 teaspoons of sugar. I could keep one in my bloodstream. I've got to shove that other sugar somewhere. And they say it's a low-fat diet. Yeah, but where do you think it's stored as? Once your glycogen stores are complete. So this is what they give you. This is the ADA's diet. If we're giving you more, your train comes in, it looks like this, it's a total disaster waiting to happen. You know your train's full, right? If you want to spread disease, this is how you do it. So what do? You just hire more pushers to push more people on the train because they can't stay out. So here's some pushers, that's insulin. So this guy's already on the train. So do you think he agrees right now, say, you know what I think the best plan is? Let's put 50 more people on the train and we'll hire more pushers to push those guys on my train. Do you think this guy would be thrilled with that? No, he doesn't want more people on the train. So here's what we do. This is what we do. And it's so crazy, but when you see it, you say, yeah, it makes sense, right? Because the train tracks that you see there that's our blood vessels, right? So we shoot insulin, we take all those people off the tracks, and we stuck them on top of the train, because the train's full now. So now this is what's called fatty liver disease, right? You have glycogen, you have fat, you have all this stuff that these scientists are talking about. But do you think all those people on the train, you say, well, that one came from orange juice, so that's okay. This one came from heart-healthy whole wheat, right? You start realizing this is the fatty liver express. This is what we're dealing with, right? So what do the experts say? Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. If you miss it, you go into starvation mode. So that means fill up your train quickly. Get everyone on the train right away, then you have to deal with that later. Eat 6 small meals throughout the day, right? Pick up people at each stop. Stop more times and pick up more people. That's pretty smart. Carbs are absolutely necessary. They don't understand basic physiology then. So you get more people waiting at each station again. Just exercise more. It's hard to do when your train looks like that, right? It's hard to exercise, and you're not going to overcome that. You're not going to burn enough calories for that sugar you're bringing in. Obviously, looking around, we know that. Heart-healthy whole wheat, orange juice, oatmeal, those are all still people on top of the train, right? You could do that all day, and you're going to be in trouble. Eat bananas. Dr. Unwin would have a stroke, right? Because he knows there's 6 scoops of sugar in a banana, and he shows us all that stuff. So that's why he had clinical success going against what the guidelines said. So what else did the experts say? Use vegetable oils and margarine. Anyone who saw the movie last night or heard the lecture yesterday knows that's not a good idea, but stay away from butter because that comes from animal stuff that we've used for thousands of years. A calorie is a calorie. You want to make Jason lose his mind? Say a calorie is a calorie. Because he says, is salmon and eggs and steak, will that fill your train? Nope. If you have eggs for breakfast, you're not filling the train. The train's like the 3 people on there. Are 100 calories of jelly beans the same as 100 calories of salmon? Like, people will argue that, and they try to make the point. Because it's a physiology problem. It's a biological problem. It's not a physics problem. We have to understand the role of hormones and all this stuff. And they're the same nice people who tell us that the trans fats are great. Let's put it in the popcorn at the movies and all that kind of stuff, right? So diabetes, and this is the biggest one. Diabetes, we've been told over and over, diabetes is a chronic, irreversible, progressive disease. Dr. Unwin talks about the power of hope. You want to take someone's hope? Say you have a disease that we can't cure. Why is everyone panicked right now about the COVID stuff? Because we don't have a cure yet. They're working on it, and there's good people working on it, but when you don't have a cure, it's panic. Like HIV, when it first came out, everyone freaked out. Everyone was socially isolated. No one wanted to touch people with HIV. People's lives, people were killing themselves because they had no hope, right? Now you take one pill and you're good. That's a good and bad thing. The reality is a lot of people are now lax because they know there's a treatment, right? So that's what comes with the territory in medicine. So this rice one, like Kelly's book, I would say get that book, because when you understand the implications, people say, I just eat rice. How many years did I eat rice cakes and gain weight? That's brutal, right? Melba toast, everyone knows who's tried to lose weight. We all did that. So now you look at eggs and broccoli, no one's getting on your train. You have spinach, you have butter, no one's getting on your train that morning. Now this is a simplified version, right? Because I'm a primary care doc and that's what I do. So how do we solve the problem? We either have more trains, muscle and fat tissue. We can have fewer people waiting, less sugar, eating less frequently, fewer stops, right? All these things are things we can do that make common sense. Ben Bakikio, I would highly recommend his book, 15 Minutes to Fitness. I made fun of him when I met him, and then I realized he's brilliant. And he's right. Yeah, he deserves a clap for that one. I agree. Because sometimes we don't look at the whole picture. We just look at our part of it and say, this is what you got to do. Exercise doesn't matter. Does it not? I think a lot of people would disagree. And when he first said that, I thought he was nuts. And then I realized he's correct. And I'll explain it if we have some time. So will hiring more pushers fix the problem? Nope. You have all those people sitting on top of your train, and no one else is getting on. You could hire all the pushers in the world. That's why we give more and more and more insulin. Unless we change what we're doing, that's the reason we're in the situation we're in. And I learned this stuff from Jason Fung, right? So this is Jeff, who's become a friend of mine. He was up to 679 pounds after failing a gastric bypass. Why? They never fixed the root cause of his problem, which was sugar addiction and food addiction and depression and anxiety, all those things. And he's talked about it publicly. He's not my patient, by the way. But he got to be 679 pounds, never got diabetes. But I thought being obese would give us diabetes. Well, he has a huge train of fat that he could store. So in the Asian community, they will get diabetes before they get fat because they don't have the luxury of getting fat. They don't have enough fat tissue, so where do you put all the overflow? That's him. Just recently in San Diego, we had to go for a hike. He's less than 300, he's like 280 pounds now. And he says a year ago he couldn't get out of the car. He couldn't have came there at all. Now he's hiking, going upstairs and doing stuff. This is an anecdote, but this is a life, right? And plus, not only that, he gives hope to other people. I have run into so many people who hear his story and they're touched. Not by anything Tro and I say, it's by the stories and your stories, and this is what I'm talking about. So the workers are HDL cholesterol. Now there's a simplified version because a lot of us are saying it's not just the HDL, but since it's the good cholesterol, they're gonna be the good workers here. The train tracks are the blood vessels, big trains muscles. People who can't get on the train are triglycerides and oversupply of energy. So these are triglycerides, the 3 happy sugar, no, I'm just like, but basically these are 3 people who can get on the train. They hold hands for safety. So now you got a lot of triglycerides. What does that mean? It means your train's full, the other sugar can't get on, and now you have a surplus of energy in the bloodstream. Like what Dave Feldman talks about, coming in, and Ivor. Because now we say, oh, look, your blood looks great. Because we injected and we shoved everyone on top of the train. This is fatty liver disease, total disaster. So HDL is just sitting at the station, right? That means everything's good. When you check your blood and your HDL is high, everything's good in the station. Now, what happens if there's problems? Those guys leave the station, now they're out working on the train tracks. That's your blood vessels. They're trying to fix the problem that we caused by having a train that's totally overloaded with people, insulin, sugar, all this stuff, metabolic disease. So now you're really screwing it up, right? Now you got all these guys there. Now what? No one's at the station anymore. They're out doing their work, right? So you're at the station right now, you don't see any of these guys, except probably the manager sitting around doing nothing, but all these guys are working, right? And so the guy in the front there, the laser pointers isn't great, but he's probably saying, hey, the guy who's looking at us probably saying, you know what, this guy's drinking a soda right now. The guy's like, I've had it, I'm out. Can't do this work anymore, it's too overwhelming, right? So maybe we should cut back on soda and smoking. Nadir Ali, a brilliant cardiologist who spoke yesterday, he says nicotine and insulin sugar are the biggest damagers of the blood vessels. I can look at angiograms and see who smokes and who's a diabetic, right? That should tell us something right there, a guy with experience like that. These are the 5 risk factors. I won't go through them in detail, but just to make it sink in, this is from the Endocrine Society, 2019. Large amounts of abdominal fat, belly fat, like we talk about, that's signs of fatty liver disease. Low HDL, like we're talking about, you have a lot of damage in your system. High triglycerides, too much energy in the system again. So maybe Jason Fung's not crazy after all by saying put less energy in your system, right? Make yourself metabolically healthier. High blood pressure, and we'll talk about that a bit. Dr. Unwin and Dr. Bickman both addressed this issue. And high blood sugar, too much energy in the system again. They couldn't get on the train, so your train's full. So low carb diet reverses all these things. Yet, the experts say this is the most dangerous thing you could do, and I took a risk by telling people this, right? Do you notice anything missing on their LDL's not even on there. That's interesting. So Dr. Kraft, in 2008 said this, and he probably said it way before that. But he's saying these studies are showing CRP, it's a measure of inflammation. That means your train is overfilled. So it's the same thing. And he's talking about triglycerides, obesity, elevated blood pressure, all these metabolic disease symptoms, right? Basically, we're saying it's causing problems with the blood vessels, all this kind of stuff. Maybe this old guy knew something and then no one took this guy serious. Just like Semmelweis, right? He said to wash your hands, and everyone thought he was nuts. He died in an insane asylum, right? Now they kind of know. Now we're all washing our hands because of this guy. So here's one I stole from Ivor. He was nice enough to loan this to me. I show my patients this on a daily basis, and I reconfirmed with them that this data is correct. Because what this study did was in the country of Colombia, they took everyone who had a heart attack, first heart attack, and then they looked and they said, what could we have done to predict this was coming? So they said, let's look at different variables. So if it's 1, that means there's no difference. So there's no difference between the people who had a heart attack and people in the general community that didn't have a heart attack. Total cholesterol, no difference. LDL, no difference. High blood pressure, doubled the risk. High insulin, almost 700% increase, right? 670 times. How come we're not talking about this? How come every cardiologist on earth doesn't say, yeah, this is scary. Maybe we need to look at that. Why? Because of what Ben Bikman says, this is through lifestyle, not a drug. We have a drug for LDL cholesterol. We have a drug for all these things. So maybe the LDL becomes bad in that environment, right? Does this not convince you a bit? This is real data. This is from Ivor also. As the A1C goes up, more likely to die of a heart attack. Look at females, right? That's scary stuff. You're going straight up like that, and our main organizations managing this says, yeah, 7's good. If you're at 7, you're at goal. Really? I have a 400% increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and I'm good? Yeah, it doesn't make sense, right? This is absolutely brilliant, and this I'll tell you about Ben Bikman. This is Ben Bikman's slide, and I reached out to him. I said, hey, Ben, if you're not talking about this slide at the talk, I want to use it because it's absolutely brilliant, and it's absolutely what I see clinically. So the green is insulin. The yellow is sugar. So what are we doing? We're following your sugar and your A1C, and we go, oh, look, your A1C is good, you're fine. I can tell you clinically, if we have time at the end, I'll tell you a case study on that. But the insulin's going up and up and up, and your sugar's staying normal. So when doctors say, nah, it's a waste of time to check insulin levels, is it? You know, I say they're wrong, and here's why. Because insulin resistance is happening. You know, your train is getting more full and more full and more full, and you're hiring more and more pushers to get this thing down. Then you have type 2 diabetes diagnosis, right? And now we say, oh, now you got type 2, now we got to do something about it. Why not say, hey, your insulin's going up every time I see you, we better address this. Because it's not going up, it's only going up because your train is full, right? And we could argue the mechanism, but that's what we see, this is what we see clinically. So it's the check engine light, warning light. So I don't have to be that smart of a doctor when I see these. When I see labs like that, when I see your triglycerides going up, your HDL coming down, all that, it's a warning sign. Say, you got trouble ahead. I don't have to be that smart to tell you that. And look here, Dr. Kraft. Individuals with normal fasting blood glucose may indeed be quite comfortable that they are non-diabetic. That is until they have their first heart attack. That goes with the data from Columbia that happened years after he said that. Rob Sivas, a good friend of mine, he does bariatric surgery. If you don't know who he is, you need to look and find out who he is. Because what he said, and I was at a meeting with Doug Reynolds, and this arrogant surgeon comes in and says, yeah, I don't do surgery on people with fatty liver disease, which is now the #1 cause of cirrhosis in the world. All right, well, what do? He's doing bariatric surgery. Everyone has fatty liver disease. He goes, we reverse the disease, then we do it. How long does that take? Three days. I said, come on. Everyone laughed, like it's ridiculous stuff. So this is a layman's version of that. You go from that huge train to no one on the train. This is for a more scientific stuff. Fatty liver disease, no fatty liver disease. 3 days apart, and pharma's spending millions of dollars trying to develop a drug to fix this problem that he's doing in 3 days. Doesn't make sense. This is Rob's slide also, which is interesting because when he presented this, I was shocked because he says, look, on the top here, you're going to see normal endothelial cells. They look like little fried eggs. They're supposed to be bad for us, by the way. But then what happens, you get sugar and insulin in there, and now you get hard-boiled eggs, right? So he's saying this is causing damage in between those cells now. You have damage. Now what? LDL's coming in. HDL, like the guys fix it, they're trying to fix the train tracks here, right? So because they're there, are they causing the problem? The problem is caused by the high glucose. And if we have time at the end, I'll go a little bit more into detail because they were trying to they knew the mortality rate was super high with people with fatty liver disease. So they were trying to figure out that problem. So they were injecting rabbits with a bunch of sugar. A bunch of cholesterol, high-fat diet, and they couldn't get atherosclerosis or fatty liver disease. And then someone says, foie gras, we do that in China, and we just give them a bunch of sugar, the ducks, and they get fatty liver disease, right? They get fatty liver, and then we can eat it. So they said, let's try that, and this is what they came up with. It was a shock to everyone because it was totally against the paradigm. So this is a normal endothelium that's down here on the bottom here. It's the fried egg. Endothelium, that's what it looks like, right? These cells just spread out like that, and it forms a boundary. So For us guys who are simple, internal medicine people, that's what we see, fried eggs. And they see a bunch of fried eggs in a pan. You know the whites, you have to cut them apart to get them out, right? Or it's a pain, because they all meld together and it forms a barrier. So what do? You give them a bunch of sugar, then it looks like this. Hard-boiled eggs. So for us simple people here, it looks like that. So now what do you have? A gap between all those cells. Now what goes in there? LDL cholesterol, HDL, what goes in there, right? So you start saying, oh, maybe it's not as simple as we thought, guys. And this is what he's talking about, the inflammation, which Dr. Kraft and all these same people are talking about. So what did he think? Dr. Kraft again. Basically saying if you get hypoglycemic, that's a reaction to insulin, you're a hyper responder, you're pumping a bunch of insulin. So fasting insulin isn't a perfect test, but if it's high, it tells us a lot of information. If it's low, maybe you could still have a low insulin and be falsely reassured, because if you do Kraft's challenge, you spike your insulin like crazy, you get hypoglycemia. That is a precursor to diabetes. And people think, I get low sugars, I'm never gonna get diabetes. Not true, you're way more likely to get diabetes. Essential hypertension. This is from 2008, right? All these things are he's saying it's not essential hypertension. We have a cause for that. We all say essential hypertension all the time. So he says he's basically saying if you haven't diagnosed him with diabetes or prediabetes, you're just missing the diagnosis, right? He saw the pathology. He may not have known all the stuff we know now. He didn't have the photomicrographs that Rob had, but he still saw the problem. So this is Ben Bikman's slide. I'm stealing it again, because if he says it, it has credibility. If I say it, you say this guy just like thinks he has the magic pill. This is all reviewed stuff from Ben. He's talking about all this stuff we're talking about. PCOS, cancer, fatty liver disease, right? Erectile dysfunction, migraines, arthritis, strokes, dementia. There's so much more on there. And I would argue strongly, depression, anxiety, stress, PTSD. Now we have too much science. I don't want to get into the science. I'm going to do primary care stuff again because I like the train stuff. So this wimpy little guy, anyone know who he is? Yeah, Sean Baker. So Sean Baker, so he's a doc who trains, so I figured that was a good analogy. So I'm train number 1, he's train number 2. And by the way, he gave me those 2 steaks. I didn't steal them from him. That was very nice of him. So this is my train, right? This is my muscle train. So I got this little train. How many people can I put on? Not very many, right? So I say, well, you're gonna put more sugar on there? No, what can I do to help my train get bigger? I can put on more muscle mass, and I add a carb there. You put on a little more muscle mass, you add a carb there. A lot of studies, Ben Bikikio has a lot of studies showing that the more muscle mass you have as you get older, the longer you live, regardless of other health other things like smoking and drinking. Muscle mass itself, why? Maybe Ben Bikman is right, that more muscle makes you more sensitive to insulin. More sensitive you are to insulin, the lower your insulin level, and then you go to Rob Sives. See, our job as a primary care is to make observations and to listen and learn, right? That's what we do. So when you see all this stuff, you say, wow, all these guys are like, when you put the whole picture together, it's like a puzzle. And once you start putting it together, say, it makes sense. No one's contradicting each other here. So this is Rob's train. I mean, this is, not Rob, Sean Baker's train, right? Probably Rob's too. But he has this huge, massive train. He can move a lot of people very quickly, right? So here's another picture. So he'll only stop for ribeyes. That's the only thing that's stopping that train. But the other thing I just thought of last night was when you get on Sean Baker's train, it's like Hotel California, you don't leave. So when muscle takes glycogen, it doesn't release it. If you start getting low sugars, it's not going that way back into the circulation, right? They're committed now. So you're getting them out of the platform. So what does that mean? So if my muscles are taking all the sugar off the train tracks, the other train, my liver train, is gonna have to let some people off the train to replace them. Otherwise, I'm gonna get low sugar levels, right? So that's an important thing that we don't talk about a lot, because that's the benefit of this weight-bearing exercise that they're talking about. So again, here's my train compared to Baker's, right? But hey, can you guys cut the live stream just for a second? Because if Sean sees this, I may not survive. But there's an inverse relationship they found between the size of your, never mind. So who are these nice people? This is glucagon. They're the nice people that let people off your train. Apparently, these people who say you need carbs with each meal have never heard of glucagon, because that's its job, is not to let you have low sugars. So these guys are nice enough, they let people off the train. So what does glucagon do? Produced by the pancreas right next to the insulin, right? Tells the liver to break down glycogen, activates gluconeogenesis. What is that? You make real sugar? Oh, so you could go without sugar and you still survive? Yes. We know that because we have continuous glucose monitors everywhere now. Helps you break down stored fat. Oh my gosh, we don't want to do that. I want to store my fat forever. I want to keep it there, right? Doesn't make sense. So we don't want to break that down. It's dangerous and it's crazy. If the pushers are active, they can't work. So if they're forcing people on the train, these guys can't let people off the train. But what messes up the guys who let people off the train? The glucagon, alcohol. So if you're going to get low sugars on a ketogenic diet, that's when it's going to happen. I could tell you I have a CGM, and I've done the experiment. Gary Fettke's talked about it. It happens because they can't do their job of letting people off the train if they're trying to detox the alcohol that we're drinking. And that's why we can get into trouble that way. So what happens when they quit? All the pushers say, you know what? Done. I'm not pushing any more people on this train. I don't want to get infected with this stuff. I quit. So they quit. What happens? Glucagon says, oh, those guys are gone. There must not be enough energy in the system because that's their job. So what do? They let everyone off the train at one time, right? This is ketoacidosis. That's when you're a disaster because we had that warning sign way before of that insulin going up and up and up. And when I was a new doc to this, Jason Fung changed my thinking. Because for us, we think, well, your sugar's high, you must not have enough insulin. If you look at that curve, right before you get diabetes, your insulin is the highest it's ever been, right? It's the highest if you're a type 2 diabetic. I want to clarify that. So that's diabetic ketoacidosis. So it's giving them more. So I'm going to give you social stuff right now. So this is the only way to get the sugar out. Now you got to pee it out. So where you give drugs that make you pee out more sugar, right? Just keep eating sugar will make you pee out more. It makes no logic. Why don't you just not put it in the other end? So this is a social thing that's important. Does anyone notice the problem with this picture? These two guys are a problem because they're blatantly violating the guy's rules, right? Because you don't turn your head sideways. All the other guys are looking straight down, and they have adequate spacing. These two guys aren't socially responsible. They're right next to that poor guy, and they're talking to everyone, right? So is it a light at the end of the tunnel or a train coming at us? This is the nutritional advice we've been receiving for 50 years. This is why I say, hey, you know what? I want people like Ivor in my lane. I want them to help us to understand there's no room for arrogance when we have a disaster on our hands, right? When 88% of us are metabolically sick. By the way, there was a brilliant tweet today from a researcher from Harvard whose lab is closed down, but talking about that, he said, look, we're seeing this with people with poor immune system. Diabetics poorly controlled. We know that. We've known that for years. It's not unique to this, but we know it. Wound infections, all these things that we see are a result. So should we keep giving the same advice over and over? Now, what do you want your train to run on? I'm sure everyone studied the kindling train, right? There's no kindling train because you have to fill that thing all the time. That's the sugar train. Now you want to run on coal? You can run a long time. You don't have to stop at every station now, right? We don't just fill our gas and go, okay, I'm just going to put like 8 cents in and I'll stop at the next gas station. You fill up your tank. And that's what people are doing. They can go between stations way better. So I have to give comments to Tro. The red letters this time are mine because I think he was limited on Twitter. This was a tweet he sent out, but he's absolutely correct. You want to check your insulin, triglycerides, CRP. He's in line with what everyone else is saying. HDL, you want to know those levels? That's an indicator. Glucose, I just added A1C because he just didn't think about it. Blood pressure, continuous glucose monitor, liver function test. Why? Because when that train is full, your LFTs go up. And if you lose weight super quickly, the LFTs go up too, as will your LDL. That's why people freak out when they start a ketogenic diet, because you're having an energy shift. If anyone doesn't know who Dave Feldman is, I would highly recommend going and learning, because you'll learn a ton. So here's the train wreck that we've been doing, right? I told you it was a train wreck today. So what do? This is in Coronado, just to make you jealous of California. So we ride our bikes, and then our path that we've been on forever is closed. So what do? Just keep going the way you always went? Or you say, I'll be smarter and go around the track, right? You go around the damage, and we have to learn that. If everyone's crashing and burning, so this is Vic. Anyone know Vic? Yeah. Well, Vic was on the podcast. He's Armenian. What do? He kept his Armenian diet and then made it into a ketogenic version. There he is on the left, low fat, low carb. I think Vic will stick with the low carb option, right? He's reversed his disease process, his blood pressure is normal, everything's great. He's wearing his son's shirts. They're too big on him, right? It's unbelievable. Christian Assad, one of the best docs around, he's dealing it in the Latin American culture, and he's changing it. He's saying, guys, look, let's change some things. Because we can have all the theory and all this stuff. If no one's going to stick to the diet, it's useless, right? It has to be something you can do. And a lot of, when you look at the vegan diet, a lot of people do it for a while, and they just say, forget it. It's ridiculous. I can't do this. I can't go out with friends. I can't. So socially, it's a problem for a lot of people. So you have to realize this. We have to be able to apply it to life and culture. So this is Italian goes keto, right? He's lost like 65 pounds now. He's normalized all this stuff. His whole family was freaking out. They're like, what do you mean you're not going to have pasta and bread? Like, what's wrong with you? You started losing weight, and everyone said, you got to go get checked out. How's the marriage? Are you doing okay at home? Right? His grandpa, no, they call him, put his arm around him and said, have you seen the doctor? And he said, well, the whole family's concerned, right? So he says, did you see me playing soccer with the kids in the front yard while everyone else was laying on the couch holding their stomach? But what these guys, him and Vic, are doing is they're making food, they're making recipes, it's available. ItalianGoesKeto.com, they're joined together because they say it's really important that we can reach our people. And Kelly's doing the same thing, right? Caesar salad, right? I just want to tell you some of the side things. Caesar salad, a great person. She was 319 pounds on the standard of care. She was on all those medicines having seizures all the time. So my profession said, hey, good news. We mapped your brain. If we cut out part of your temporal lobe, there's a 60% chance you can be seizure-free. And she said, well, I want to try a keto diet. That's too dangerous, right? It's too dangerous. We're going to cut your brain, and then you wonder how many people this has happened to that could have just changed their lives. 5 years, no seizures. Does she cheat on her diet? No. Why? It's not worth it to have a seizure. It's not worth it. She has total compliance, right? And now she's lifting weights, doing all this stuff. Super nice person, too. So 50% of kids with epilepsy, refractory to meds, can improve with diet. So would you rather have your brain cut on, or would you rather change your diet? Now, these people are big heroes to me. What do they all have in common? Psychiatrists. It's one thing we've kind of missed here, but I think it's critically important. They're all treating anxiety, depression, PTSD. This nutty guy right here, who's one of my heroes, right? Chris Palmer, schizophrenia. When I heard about this guy, I said, the guy's nuts. There's no way schizophrenia is going to benefit. So I asked him, why are you doing that? He said, well, what do we treat schizophrenia with? Seizure drugs. Ketogenic diet works for seizures. Maybe it would help these guys. And he has case studies reported now, right? Depression, anxiety, stress, all these things. These two are carnivores. I am seeing, anecdotally, a ton of carnivores, depression, anxiety, stress get better. Self-reported. This is all this stuff. There's studies, I put some of them at the end but there's tons of testimonies. Look at Sean Baker stuff. It's incredible. And I'm making that observation. I don't know why it is. We don't have an answer why it is, why specifically, because generally carnivores have a lower ketone levels. If it's the ketones doing it, they shouldn't have as much benefit. Brett we just had on the podcast, unbelievable story, tons of meds, and now he's off all of his meds on a carnivore diet. And he's an interesting one because he said fasting, he started getting depressed again. So once he ate meat, it went back. So there may be some nutrient, I don't know what it is, but I'm just telling you, my job is to observe, you guys figure it out, the smart scientists. So these are my patients that were featured in the movie. All of them, because they were focusing on metabolic health, we talked about them coming off insulin, losing weight, getting off blood pressure meds, but all of them, their mood got better. That was the biggest surprise to me because I was looking at diabetes. We know we're on an epidemic right now. So their mood got better. So what do they say? Respectfully, they disagree with the experts who said they couldn't come off insulin. But in private, they use word combinations that would make Tro very proud, right? Because these people have suffered and their lives were at risk. And what did I give them? Hope. And I shared what I learned here, right? What I learned from Doug Reynolds, what I learned from these conferences, right? Because if I didn't know that, where would they be now? Where would they be? I know where they would be. This lady on the end lost 200 pounds. So before you judge someone and say, oh, she's got weight to lose, she's lost 200 pounds. How many people do you know who've done that? Tro's only lost 150, so he's not even close to her yet, right? So it's Rob Sivas, right? Joan Iflin. Addiction. Could it be addiction? If you listen to the podcast, episode number 10 with Rob. Well, I was going to say, by the way, there's no conflict of interest because I don't get paid. I pay money for that podcast. So, but these two totally changed my view of our problem. Because we keep saying exercise more. It's like saying, oh, alcohol is not a problem. Just don't drink as much as you exercise. It's a dumb thing. I mean, we get into these things where they say everything in moderation. Really? If you're addicted to alcohol, do you give it in moderation? Do I tell my alcoholic, yeah, have a glass of wine every once in a while so you don't binge on alcohol at some point? That would be horrible advice, right? So Rob was the first one who made that point. And why does he make the point? He lost 100 pounds doing low-carb keto, but he's gained back 30 pounds 3 different times. Why? Because he's an addict, right? He goes, I'm a carb addict. If it's in my house, I will eat it. So that's a voice of reason saying, get this stuff out of your house because you're going to have a weak moment. You're going to want it. One of my big concerns now with this whole COVID thing is, I've talked to several people, and they said, everyone's filling up their stuff with junk food and candy because they're stressed. You're going to stress eat. That puts you at a higher risk of infection. We know that already based on the data we're seeing. So do we want to isolate? I mean, isolate's a good idea, but while you're isolating, maybe doing fasting would be better for you than eating Pop-Tarts and Twinkies to make yourself feel better, right? Those are the things that are flying off the shelves like crazy, the comfort food. I wonder why, because everyone's stressed. So, and also Chris Palmer, if you have a chance, follow him on Twitter. He wrote an excellent article on dealing with this from an emotional stress standpoint. Because what we know now is the more stressed you are, the more stress eating you do. So if we can make your stress better, that thing seems to start going away. So it's not willpower, it's being adapted, fat adapted. Because then those things lose their power over you. And a lot of people say, I feel free finally for the first time in my life. She has a 408-page book on this, I think 31 or 41 chapters with tons of references. This is not like hocus pocus science, guys. This is real. Dr. Unwin, this nutty guy, right? He takes 154 people, type 2 diabetes, with his non-sustainable diet for 2 years, low carb, significant reduction in blood pressure, mean weight loss, 21 pounds, occurred despite 20% reduction in blood. So this guy's taking people off blood pressure medicines, they're losing weight, their blood pressure is getting better while you're stopping the medicine. Hyperinsulinemia again, that goes back to what everyone else is saying, the same thing. This guy in the middle of nowhere figures this out, right, independently. And we don't see this in non-diabetic or in insulin resistant. So if you get your insulin right, and I've seen it clinically, you could go on a lot of salt, which we recommend to people, right? Christian Assad is treating heart failure with a ketogenic diet, and they're getting better, and they're able to eat salt again. It's crazy, coming off diuretics. Cholesterol got better, triglyceride, all the stuff that fills your train got better. Deprescribed 35 medications. Weight loss cannot, because my cardiologist friends make me nuts, because my patients go in and they lost weight, and their blood, everything is normal. They go, it's because of weight loss. Just because of weight loss has nothing to do with hormones or anything like that. It's just weight loss. It's not just the weight loss. They're saying that. Dr. Unwin's saying that. What does Ben Bikman say? This guy, he deflates my bubble sometimes because he's so brilliant, right? So he took 11 women, 18 to 45, who were diabetic, average A1C 8.9, volunteered to participate in this study, 90 days, and he said they met at a gym, right? So here's his results. This is what he was looking at. They lost weight, blood pressure, everything got better. He's just like Unwin. They're saying the same exact thing. A1C at 5.6. So they went from 8.9 to 5.6. And I said, well, Ben, what kind of workout are these women doing? He said, we didn't want to change the baseline. We didn't want to confuse things. They did no additional. They did their average exercise they did before. So diet alone made a difference. So us low carb people start thinking, oh, it's just diet. Exercise doesn't matter. You put those two together, and you have a very lethal weapon against diabetes. And the ratios, you could look here, everything got better. But the LDL didn't change, but everyone says it's going to go, the expert said it's going to go high. It didn't. So basically he's saying, look, this is something we have to look at, guys. This is a small study. It's 11 people, but 11 people in a row. All 11 improved with support, with guidance, with someone saying, hey, look, it's not a lost cause. Like for my new diabetics, it's like someone who just had a heart attack. They'll listen to anything you say. When you get diagnosed with diabetes, now you're a captive audience, right? So these people, when you give them hope, but if I say, look, we're just going to throw you on insulin and you can't change it, this is what's going to happen, because you saw your mom and grandma and everyone else do the same thing, hope is a very valuable thing in medicine and in life. This is my patient. She made me nutty for a lot of years. So she's lost, how much did she lose? She's lost like 45 pounds. Her A1C was 8.9. Now it's 5.6. But what was her motivation? She came in on crutches crying on the picture on the left, like before that, because she wanted a knee replacement so bad. She was miserable, couldn't walk. She goes, Doc, clear me. I said, with an A1C of 8.9, because we all know, obviously now in the news, we're saying the higher your sugars are, the biggest risk of infection is high sugar levels. So if I send her for surgery, she's going to have a disaster on her hands. So I said, you got to get your act together. Here's your options. I can put you on insulin, lower your sugar down for surgery, but you're going to gain weight, you're going to be metabolically sick and all this stuff, and then you're going to get more and more, then you're going to be mad at me, and I'm going to be mad at you. Or we could do lifestyle, like I've been telling you for the last 2.5 years. So what she do, lifestyle. She reversed all of her stuff. Blood pressure normalized, took her off blood pressure medicines. Sugars are 5.6 now, right? Now I'm going to get letters from an insurance company saying, why isn't she on a statin? Well, because all of her numbers are normal, and she's not in the diabetic range anymore, right? And if she maintains it, that's what we're going to do. If she goes up, then we have to look at that. So I said, you're cleared for surgery, no problem. Her A1C was 6.2 after 6 weeks. From 8.9 to 6.2 in 6 weeks, and then I know if I extrapolate that her sugar's a lot lower than that because half of that sugar was in that really high range. I said, you're cleared for surgery. And she looks at me and said, well, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. I said, you're kidding me. She goes, look, I'm climbing stairs. She squats down in my office, does all this stuff. I'm like, how can that be? It's because of the weight loss? So I called Ben Bikman. He goes, Brian, he laughs. He goes, Brian, you should have expected that. We see it all the time. Why? Because the chondrocytes can start working again. The inflammation goes down the joints and all this stuff. The joint can start doing what it's supposed to do. So how many diabetics are getting knee replacements that maybe if we intervene first with this crazy, magic pill, that we can help them? This is my 80-year-old, don't get excited, he's 80 years old. But one of the nicest people on earth, I talked to him briefly about low carb, and I said, he's 80 years old, he's not gonna change what he's doing. And I said, what motivated you? He said, well, I bent over to tie my shoes and I couldn't breathe. So he went on a diet, 46 pounds down, reverses pre-diabetes, and his blood pressure is normal. These are nutritionists, I'm running low on time, I can't believe it. But these are all registered dietitians, nutritionists, great people. All of them are saying low carb is the way to go. That picture's low fat, low carb. Which one do you think she likes? This guy, Jason Fung, he said, oh, fast. Oh, but I'm gonna go into starvation mode. Kirsty Woods here, she has metabolic testing they do, thousands of patients. She says it's BS. I'm looking at the data, not someone's opinion. 3 days of fasting, if someone's fat adapted, their metabolic rate stays the same or goes up on thousands of patients. So maybe Jason's not as crazy as everyone said he was a little while ago, right? All these guys, cardiologists, more on the vegetarian, more fish side. Obviously, he says I made 5 mistakes, so that's pretty good. These guys are like, well, it's more than that. He's being kind. So, but these two guys are engineers stepping into our realm and changing medicine, because a lot of the train stuff is coming from them. I wouldn't understand this concept. So, Siobhan Huggins, don't forget her, the sidekick, right? She's lost tons of weight. She's got her cholesterol better, right? And then mood, all these things have happened. So all these people are a testimony of what we can do. And I'll close on this. This is someone who's here, a good friend of mine now. We met in, this is another reason we go to these conferences, Boca Raton. My life changed there. My whole future changed there because of people I met, right? My new partner I met there. So this is from the FAA. He's controlled. After his doctor saying, his endocrinologist said, look, you need to go on insulin, because it's been 8 years and that's about the time frame we put everyone on insulin, his sugar's out of control, without telling him to change his diet. He was exercising like crazy, not getting better. Then he does this stuff, and the FAA sends him a letter. Because if he goes on insulin, guess what? He's not flying. His career was over, right? So fortunately, the experts were wrong yet again, because his life, career, family changed, and now he has hope that he can reverse this disease process, rather than saying, look, this is a natural, inevitable thing that happens. That's why all these people you're listening to, being here, this is the value. Because when you look at the ultimate numbers of how many people are dying, your family members are way more likely to die of diabetes complications than anything else on earth, right? Insulin resistance. So that's the end of the train wreck. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.